we are talking to Brother Wendell Phillips, a native of Lansing, Michigan.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Here in Minneapolis, I've been here about a year and a half now, and I'm just excited for a new opportunity to bring exposure to the LED digital shot clock and backboard, and knowing the many inducements that had carried over to the digital shot clock in your arenas, NBA arenas, the college arenas, and the video billboards that you see on the interstates across the country and your airports and train stations. This is all the caption of what derived from the LED backboard. So hopefully those who are listening want to understand what has transpired up until this point. It's been a gruesome pursuit of getting justice and finding out that the government itself was involved in my demise to prevent me from excelling. It's no different than what happened in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Brownsville, in Chicago, and various cities across the country.
Talk about yourself. Talk about, where you grew up, your family, and some of your initial influences as a youth in Lansing, Michigan. Let's talk about your early years, brother. Go ahead and just tell the audience about that.
1957, my mother happened to see a newspaper, and it was in the Detroit Free Press, and she already knew my name would be Phillips, but she saw a paper that said Wendell Phillips, and so that's how everything kicked off from that. Growing up, my father used to barbecue in the community, and it was a neighboring community, and across the street, what I've been known to now is that across the street from me was Earvin Johnson, and who is now today Earvin Magic Johnson.
So you grew up across the street?
Right across the street, and we ended up becoming only in the game, arch rivals from high school, because our group ended up moving to the east side, and busing came in to where Earvin ended up going to Everett High School. Ordinarily, he probably would have went to Sexton, and I would have went to Sexton as well, because that's where, most of the black folks went to, was Sexton.
Well, let me ask you this. First of all, what is your mom and your father's name?
Wendell Phillips, they called him Woody, and my mother's name is Sadie. Okay. And they're from Arkansas. My father took a lot of pride about coming from Arkansas. He toured the country looking for work, and I found out that he was a chauffeur in New Orleans and went as far as the Upper Peninsula in Michigan to pick cherries until it was time. The plant, Fisher Body plant, opened up in Pontiac, and then one opened up in Lansing, and he ended up in Lansing to work in the plant, and that's how we ended up in Lansing.
Okay, so your parents were part of the first migration wave, would you say, from the south to the north? To that extent, and my mother worked various jobs at Michigan State University, cleaning up the fraternity houses until employment opened up with the post office, and so she ended up working for the United States Post Office. Okay. And that's how, our family was raised. Okay, talk about your family. Brothers and sisters, how many brothers and sisters, and where are you in that order?
Well, I have several brothers and sisters, but in the fold of Woodrow and Sadie, there was 11 of us, and there was 8 sisters and three brothers, and I'm the oldest of the 3 brothers. Okay. My oldest sister, Loretta, she passed about 4 years ago in 2013, And so we came from a close-knit family, and pretty much that's the way the family was in Lansing. You know, everybody know everybody, but family values were very important, and standing up for a cause was what I remember most of all. I remember one time, you know, I was about my second year coming out of college, you know, and I was driving, and a guy was tailing me behind our car too close, and it just so happened he was my white brother. You know, I'm not making the issue of color directly, but he got ramming his car into my father's car, and you know, I'm running home, and next thing I know, guy gets out the car and he called me the N-word, and I started speaking in tongues and running a flurry of fists. And guy across the street came out with a pretty pearl-handled pistol, and I was marveled at the gun rather than knowing that he's about to shoot my head off. My father run outside the house and stood between me and the gun and looking at the white man saying, "Hey, I live my life. Let my son live." And from that point on, you know, I love my dad anyway, but it just lets me know sometimes you have to make a stand. And for the 20 years of pursuing this innovation, I want it to be known that, you know, corporation, Daktronics, and whoever else who conspired with the government is not going to get away with this. And the things that they've done to me by saying that I'm a terrorist and all the other negative, nasty things that go in between, I want to expose them, because, you know, we as a race of people in the United States have made very great contributions, and at the rate that things are going, it's got to be a change, and the change got to start with us. But I just don't want to digress too much.
Well, let's do this. We're going to get to that part, right? But I want to know more about some of your early years. So you grew up as the oldest brother, the oldest child in the family, correct?
No, I was the oldest son. My sister Loretta was the oldest daughter.
Okay.
She had about 5 years on me.
Okay, and let's just say, what year did you start high school?
1973.
1973, you started high school. Okay. And you mentioned that at the time when you was talking about those early years, you were also in that first wave of integrated schools. You talked about being bussed out of your neighborhood, not necessarily attending the neighborhood school, correct? High school?
Well, the bus wave was involved, but when my parents moved from one side of town to another, we were already in that district, so we didn't have to be bussed out.
Okay.
But if I would have stayed on Middle Street, living across the street from Earvin, Magic, we would have probably ended up going to Eastern High School anyway, because there was a certain side of where the street, the people on the west side of the street was going to Everett, and then the people on the east side was going to go to Eastern, and then 496 Highway, that was north of us, the people on the north side of 496 were going to Sexton. So they broke us up into the...
Like you was right on the line.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We'll talk about this, because that was a very pivotal time in history. Talk about the Lansing, Michigan. Talk about the black community at that time. What was it like? What were some of the things that you remember that kind of gives a little more context about black folks in that historically black community, I assume, in Lansing?
That 496 ran right through Lansing, just like I find out here in Rondo community of St. Paul, Minneapolis. That 496 highway
broke up the community.
Broke up the community. I mean, when I was a kid, my father used to take me and I'd get my hair cut, get my shoes shined. There was a place called Stone's Pharmacy. Mr. Hosey was the pharmacist, the first black pharmacist. We had gas stations. I mean, anything that you want, restaurant. It was an all-black community, and we used that strip to patronize one another. I mean, before I really knew about the association of complete integration was probably at the age of 5 or 6 years old. But growing up, everything that we needed was right in our community, and we got adapted to our resources. But when our resources off the main strip were taken away, we were forced to go to other areas across town to interact with, or forced to interact, if you want to say, with other communities where our dollars, my parents, where they work, our monies were going to buy products from a different side of town to help their tax revenue base, whereas the majority who were coming across town probably was renting at the time. Not saying that they all were renting, but you know.
Yeah, so with that said, in that changing climate of independent, self-sustained black communities that had an economic flow, established economic flow there, how did you feel that change, that impact affected your family and other families in that time period?
Well, you know, growing up, you don't really pay attention other than what you see from observation, and then you make a retrospection as you grow older to look back and question, just like any other conscientious black person for black awareness. We come to the conclusion and the realization that why was the new laid out structures or the arteries of the interstate coming through the black community? And it split us up, number one, from being in communication with our other black brothers and sisters, you know, and those who chose to feel that they wanted white to flight out into the suburbs and thinking that that was going to be a serene haven where there was greater peace and unity. That's another issue within itself, making you think that you're going to be accepted. To me, that connection was cut off, and it affected us in multiple ways. So that's as far as I can go with that there.
Okay. Well, check this out, brother. We're just cracking this whole thing open. As you said, you know, because we are talking to Wendell Phillips, the inventor of the 24-second LED digital shot clock, the invention that changed everything in the modern day game of basketball, and also spilt out to other industries, spilt out to advertising and other things. But what I want to do is just let people know that, you know, when we have innovation and things that come with creativity, a lot of times these things start from very early experiences, very early influences that stem from our childhood, our community, our interaction with community, and those who shaped our early years. So I just want to emphasize that story about the changing freeway and how that impacted the city of Lansing, the community, the black community of Lansing at that time, is a story not only for Lansing, but that story was a national story and a breakdown and breakup of many self-sustained, thriving, independent black communities at that time period. So I want the listening audience to really understand that, first of all, you are listening to Brother Wendell Phillips, once again, historic inventor, and we're going to crack open his story a little more when we come back after this first break.
Freedom Radio.
They're playing
Get